Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. Well, seeing how we're pulling Category 6A, the most powerful twisted pair in the world, you got to ask yourself this one question. Did I pull 295 or 300 feet? Well, do you feel lucky? Do you, punk? In this podcast, you'll learn the differences between a 66 and 110 punch tool, the proper way to install a support cable, along with testing and certifying the cable. What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. The elite professional, knowledgeable, and experienced in leading-edge ICT design principles. So join us as we talk about the ever-changing world of telecommunications. From ISP to OSP, from copper to fiber, design to installation. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
So today in the United States, it's a holiday for us. It's actually a holiday for me and my guest who's on there today. The holiday is Memorial Day. And a lot of people get confused about that holiday, but the holiday is really to pay tribute for those men and women who chose to put on the uniform and pay the ultimate sacrifice for wearing that uniform. So today is a day of remembrance, a solemn day. And a lot of times people forget about that. And that got me thinking about our industry. And you know what? There's a segment of the military industry that does cabling, and it's called a Cable Dawg. So I've got a guest on today who is a Cable Dawg, and we welcome him to the show. Welcome to the show, Dan. How you doing?
Hey, Chuck. Thanks so much for having me. And Memorial Day is a really important day. Just last year, March 11th, 2020, the Air Force lost a Cable Dawg in Iraq. His name was Tech Sergeant Marshall Roberts. He was assigned to the 219th Engineering and Installation Squadron, which is headquartered in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And unfortunately, the base was hit with some rockets, and he was a casualty of that attack. And so, today I just want to recognize him and all the contributions that he made. He was the non-commissioned officer in charge up at the 219th. And so what that means is that he did a lot of training. He made sure that his airmen were mentored, and his wife served along with him in the Tulsa Air National Guard. She's assigned to a fighter wing up there. Her name is Christy, and they have I think a 9-year-old daughter, Paige. And so I just want to say that we're thinking about them today, and that this will be a great event for us to talk about cabling and to help people, because that's exactly what Tech Sergeant Roberts would want us to do. So let me raise a glass to him. Cheers. Thank you.
You would normally think that Cable Dawg MOS would be somewhat of a safer, if there is such thing as a safe MOS in the military. You wouldn't think that, somebody would get injured or die in that MOS, but I'll definitely dedicate this show to him. And we thank the industry lost somebody today, or lost somebody on that event. And so did our country. So we thank him and his family for those, for the sacrifices, because paying the ultimate sacrifice. So Dan, tell us, how did you get into communications?
Yeah, so I am the son of a 33-year Bell Telephone lineman. So my dad worked for Bell Telephone, and he was a lineman for him for 33 years. And he worked primarily in the Minneapolis market. And so I'm originally from Wisconsin, lived on a border town in Wisconsin, and my dad would commute back and forth to the Minneapolis area and the suburbs there. And so one of the things that I remember being maybe 6 or 7 years old, Chuck, is I would be the guy that would go with my dad on a weekend to install a telephone for a customer. So it was kind of a little side hustle that my dad had. And if you think back in the 1970s and 1980s, most people had, they had one telephone in their house, and it was bolted to a wall, and the phone rang. You got up and you walked over to wherever the telephone was located, and you answered it, and you stood around that area. And much different than today. And so some people thought, you know what, I'd like to have a second telephone or maybe a third telephone in my house. And so I can remember my dad got paid $50 back in 1980, $50 to go do a new telephone install. And so the area where I lived, there was a lot of wood frame houses, and the cable would get installed typically in the crawl space of, so underneath the house. And, my dad was 5'10", 250 pounds. He's a really big guy. And he had a 6-7-year-old kid that was much smaller, could get underneath the crawl space a lot easier. So he'd drill a hole in the floor. He'd shine a flashlight down, and he'd say, hey, bring this cable to the hole and shove it up in the hole. And so that was some of my first experiences. And then I got to watch him terminate. And so terminating the cable back in the day, it was a 2-pair drop. And so if we remember, it was red and green and black and yellow. Yep. And so in the industry, we called it Christmas trees and bumblebees. That color code is Christmas trees and bumblebees. So got an opportunity to learn how to terminate cables on a terminal style, a screw style block. And so that's how I got my first exposure to it. And then fast forward, graduate from high school, I went in the United States Air Force. And I went in 1991, and I became a cable systems journeyman, which is otherwise known as a Cable Dawg. And so I went to tech school at Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas. It's about a 6-month school. And you learn things like electronic principles. You learn things like climbing telephone poles, hanging strand on telephone poles, lashing cable. You learn things like splicing fiber and splicing copper and troubleshooting and punching down on 66 blocks, which that was, back in the early 90s, that was some of the latest technology that was out, was a 66 block. And pouring lead sleeves and repairing lead sleeves and putting on boots and installing cable in a manhole system. And so there's a lot of things that the Air Force provided training on. And once you finish that up, then you go out to your first duty station. And so I was fortunate enough to be stationed in Turkey, in Guam, Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, and MacDill, and then I was TDY a whole bunch of places. Got out in 1999, so I did 2 enlistments. And if you remember, Chuck, back in the late 90s was the big .com. I mean, it was crazy the amount of manpower that was needed for IT related fields. People were leaving jobs as accountants to join the IT field because it was much more lucrative for them. And so I had a great opportunity. There was a chief master sergeant that I worked for at MacDill. He retired right around the same time that I got out, and he recommended me for a job with GTE. Of course, GTE is a staple in the state of Florida where you live. Mm-hmm. And that job was to go around and install cabinets and cabling in data centers. And so I traveled the entire East Coast building out data centers. And our primary customer at the time was AOL. So there's not a whole lot of AOL left, but that was the number one email provider. Mm-hmm. Back in the early 90s. and up into even the early 2000s. And then on May 31st of 2006, so 15 years ago today, I started my career at Leviton. So that's a little bit about how I got here today.
It's funny because it sounds like we had a lot of very similar career paths. The only difference is, and I'm kind of sad that I didn't do this, it sounds like the schooling that you got in the Air Force was really good, because outside in the private sector, generally the training you get is kind of focused, right? It's commercial building training. It sounds to me like you did outside plant, you did fiber, you did copper. It just sounds like a really well-rounded training.
It absolutely was, yeah. And that would be one of my recommendations. So if you're an airman, or you're, in any branch of the service, and you get an opportunity to go to instructor duty at Shepherd Air Force Base, because even though it's an Air Force base, they'll allow Army instructors, Marine Corps, Navy. If you've got the right stuff, they will allow you to be an instructor there. And I think that that's a really valuable tool for your career if you plan on being in IT infrastructure for a long time. I unfortunately didn't get an opportunity to do that. I have since been back to teach a couple classes to the instructors though, and that was really rewarding for me to do. So
that's absolutely cool. So let me ask you, because you say Cable Dawg. I've always referred to myself as a Cable Dawg. I don't know where I got that term, but I was never in the military. What exactly is a Cable Dawg?
Well, from a military perspective, I'll give you just a really short answer. If you're in the Air Force, it means that you're part of cable and antenna systems. If you're in the Army, you're a 25 Lima. If you're in the Navy, you're an information systems specialist. And the Marine Corps, they kind of did, I think they got rid of the Cable Dawgs there, but I think they were 0612s and 0613s, which were wiremen. And so lots of consolidation happening, not only in the Air Force, but across all different branches of the military. I would say the Air Force probably would be the best suited to train you to be successful in the commercial sector. They do tactical stuff. They just don't do as much as like the Army and the Marine Corps used to. So I had a comm squadron commander that if you asked him that question, what is a Cable Dawg? He would say, in my squadron, and so a squadron for a communication squadron would be, it could be network guys, it could be radio, it could be SATCOM, it could be basically anything to do with IT, telecommunications, getting a signal from point A to point B. Lots of different functions in a communication squadron. If you were to ask him that today, he would say a Cable Dawg is a person who has the best chance to win in a bar fight. That would be his answer.
Why would he say that?
Well, because typically Cable Dawgs are maybe a little tougher than some of the other fields within the Air Force communication squadron. And I think he maybe was just trying to poke a little fun, but there's maybe a little truth to that too. So
there's a lot of sarcasm that goes through our industry.
Yeah.
Whether it's military or civilian. So let me ask you this: how is cabling different in the military compared to what a commercial cable installer does?
Yeah, good question. So the number one thing would be the difference between classified networks and unclassified networks. And so I'm not going to go into all the nuances about what makes up a classified network just because of operational security, OPSEC. But what I will say is that it's hardened. It's a hardened infrastructure, and the intent with a classified network is to make sure that no one can penetrate it, and that you have the ability to do visual inspections on a daily basis. A non-secure network is going to be comparable to like a traditional commercial network. And that network is, it's going to follow TIA standards. It's going to follow the NEC. It's going to follow BICSI best practices. And, I would say, depending on where you're at, what military base you're at, the level of training that they've had will determine on how close to the standards that they'll follow. And so another thing that's a little bit different from like military cabling versus commercial cabling is just the different environments that you're going to cable in. One day you might be working in an air traffic control tower. Another day you might be trenching out by a flight line. Another day you might be in a SCIF, which stands for Secure Compartmentalized Information Facility. And so that could be underground. You might be working just in a traditional admin type building. You might be working in a building where they would launch nuclear missiles from. So there's just a wide range of different types of cabling environments. And I would say one of the great things about being a military cable dog is the opportunities for you to go ahead and travel the world. I've had an opportunity to trench cable in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, and Guam, install cable all throughout the globe. And I think it really makes you a much better installer when you get faced with different types of environments. I think it makes you a better engineer if that's the path that you go down later in your career. And so I think just all in all, I think there's a lot of similarities when you're talking about just a traditional non-secure network versus a commercial network. I would say it's almost the exact same. The differences might just be that, one day you're working in a weapon storage area, another day you might be working in a missile silo or at a launch control facility. So there's just a lot of different environments that you might work in. So
it sounds to me like any company who has the opportunity to hire a cable dog better jump in. And we'll dive more into that a little bit later on, because it sounds to me like that's going to be a well-versed person that you want to have on your team. So let me ask you this. I'm going to wind back the clocks of time. If you can go back and come across a young 18-year-old Dan getting ready to go in the Air Force, what recommendation, what tips of advice would you give him?
Yeah, I would say network. And after you think you've networked enough, network some more.
And by network, you mean people network or not?
That's right.
Network. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a missed opportunity by some that they maybe don't participate in AFCEA events. So AFCEA is it's like a military chapter that specializes in technology. And so it's not just structure cabling, it's satellite. There's just a number of things that are covered there. Active AFCEA chapters have monthly meetings, and they'll have guest speakers that'll come in and talk about, maybe it's the latest and greatest technology. Maybe it's a lessons learned on a project. Another thing that I would recommend is BICSI. I think BICSI is an absolutely fantastic organization. And I know that you're an active member in BICSI, and as am I, and a lot of other people in our industry. I think the more BICSI training that you can get while you're in the military, I think that is something that will pay you 10 times over. And so I think that that's a great thing. In the Air Force, there's an engineering and installation squadron for active duty members in Keesler, Mississippi. And it's it's Keesler Air Force Base, and that's in Biloxi, Mississippi. And it's called the 85th E&I unit, Engineering and Installation Unit. That unit is a unit that travels all around the globe, and they do new installs. And so it could be an outside plant install, maybe where they're installing a manhole duct system. It could be inside plant cabling, could even be towers. They might go out and install towers, or it could be a combination of all three. I think if you're a young airman and you get an opportunity to get an assignment to Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, I think that is time well spent. You get a whole bunch of installations underneath your belt in a lot of different environments. If you've ever had to trench cable in Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, you'll know there is just a ton of caliche there. And it's like sawing through a rock. Or the same thing could be said if you did an underground project in the Azores. And I mean, just lots of rock trenching. Just what a brilliant opportunity for a young airman to get out and just get a whole bunch of installs underneath their belt. And so I would recommend that. Yeah, certifications, definitely a big thing. And I'm not just talking about Bixie certifications. I'm not talking about just Bixie techs or installers or, RCDDs. I think if you have an opportunity and the Air Force is willing to pay for it, to get some different types of networking certifications too. I think the more the merrier. You have no idea what this industry is going to look like in 20 years. So,
yep. I was actually just interviewed Patrick McGlellan from Cable Installation and Maintenance Magazine. I asked him, where do you see our industry going in 10 years? And he's like, he kind of struggled at first because you don't know with our industry. You just don't know. It's like,
yeah.
And you probably heard the same thing. When I first got in this industry, 40 something years ago, the first thing was copper's going away. Everything's going to fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And then 20 years later, copper's going away because of wireless. And now we're talking about single pair Ethernet.
Yeah.
Right? And now we're talking out to, 10 megabit internet networks out to 1,000 feet for industrial things. So we're still doing cabling, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And that's why I think when you said your recommendations of certifications, I think you're spot on. Same thing with networking. I was a late bloomer for that, unfortunately. I was just the cable installer. I just wanted to do my job and go home. I don't care. And I spent 20 years like that before I realized, if I really want to get higher up the ladder, I really need to kind of not be so antisocial and kind of start meeting people and stuff. So those are some really, really good words of advice. Because I spent the majority of my career in the DC area. I cabled everywhere, but in the US I have, not outside the US. I got the cable some pretty interesting, because I've had some security clearance as well. And I got this cable some pretty interesting places. And probably the most interesting place that I did was cabling at the Supreme Court building.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually got to do cabling. I actually stood behind the Supreme Court justice's bench and stuff. And you're just kind of in awe of the history when you do that kind of stuff, So what is one of the most interesting places that you've pulled cable?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer this two different ways. I'm going to talk about an outside plant project, and I'm going to talk about an inside plant project. So from an outside plant project perspective, I would say in Turkey, I had an opportunity to trench in some outside plant cable along the flight line. And so we were replacing some different types of communication systems, some flight line systems to, tell you how high the aircraft are, tell you how fast the wind speed is, ILS, that sort of thing. And the thing that made this project so neat, so it was probably 2 weeks. I probably trenched all throughout the flight line for about 2 weeks. So the thing that made this thing so neat is this is right after the Gulf War. And so we were patrolling the no-fly zone. And the base that I was at had F-15s, F-16s, A-10s, F-111s, and I think there might have been even some F-4s. And my work center was right at the end of the runway. And so in the morning, when they were going out to fly sorties, or if they had a real world active response that they had to respond to, they would get down the runway pretty fast. So I'm sure a lot of people, probably including you, Chuck, you've probably been to an air show at some point in your life. And those are really neat to see. And you can kind of see the power that those jets will have and how fast they can fly and how maneuverable they are. That is a non-real world situation. When you see jets flying in a real world situation, you can magnify that by 3. I mean, they just rip down the runway. So here's 19 or 20-year-old Dan Munson. I'm on a 6510 trencher, and because we were out by the runway, probably had to bury the cable 3 or 4 feet deep, or a little bit deeper than what we typically would bury. And I'm going parallel with the runway a lot of that 2 weeks, and so I would see pilots take off. And, they're carrying 500 to 2,000 pounds of freedom incentive tools with them, and they're coming back empty. And so I'm on the trencher, and I'd see a pilot come in and they give me the thumbs up, it means they hit their target. And you'd see the same pilot 2 or 3 times a day. And meanwhile, you're driving down on this trencher, and you're burying cable, and what's happening. And
he's traveled thousands of miles, and you made it 410 feet.
Right. Yeah. So, man, that was probably one of the neatest environments that I've ever done an outside plant project in. So an inside plant project would be in Saudi Arabia. So I was there in 1997, and we were supporting Southern Watch there at the time, and we had U-2 aircraft. And so if you're an aircraft guy and about U-2's aircraft, they got a really long wingspan. It's like over 100 feet long. And we didn't have any hangars to put these in. Well, the Saudis had built some really, really large hangars, and they let us use them. And so we had to go and install a network inside of this hangar. Well, the only restriction when we were doing this install, because we had to remove everything, so it was a temporary use for this network, is we couldn't drill a single hole in a wall. And so if you're running a thin net that you're crimping RG58 or 59 connections on, and you're in this massive hangar, and so this hangar had 2 bays, and you could put 2 U-2 aircraft side by side in 1 bay.
Wow.
So it was by far the largest hangar I've ever been in my life. And so we had some pretty good distances that we had to run. Of course, thin net is limited in your distance. And anyway, so it made for a really, really challenging environment to bring a network up so that these pilots and support staff on the U-2 program could tap into the network and not affect the building by drilling holes in it, and being able to remove the network easily. So that was probably one of the most unique and fun installs. I didn't follow any TIA standard, by the way, in that. So
I don't think they were coming out to inspect that job.
No, they didn't.
Why did they not want you to drill holes into the building? Was it a historical significance to it or something?
No, it was a brand new building. And so we didn't own the building. They were basically just letting us use it. And so when we turned the building back over to them, they wanted it to be in the exact same condition. And so they didn't want a single hole to be able to have to go back in and patch or anything like that. And so there'd be like some EMT and stuff that would be running down the concrete wall. So what we'd do is we'd pull the screw out of a clamp on an EMT, we'd zip that screw back through some Velcro, and then we would just kind of attach the cable running down the wall that way. And when you're given a puzzle like that, you figure things out and you can become creative. You find out where all the cracks are in the building to route cable. And we use some of those. I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but it's basically kind of like a little ramp that you can lay cable on the floor. You put this little plastic ramp over it so that people don't trip on it.
Right.
Cable
guard.
Yeah, cable guard. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So we would use those in certain locations where, there was no other option. And so it was pretty neat. And it was pretty neat to learn a little bit about the U-2 aircraft. Did you know those pilots basically are wearing astronaut suits?
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I'm a huge aviation guy. I love planes. So I got one last question for you. And so you and I, our circles cross. Oh, I want you to talk a little about your Cable Dawg Facebook page too, a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, I developed a page on Facebook. It's called Cable Dawg University. And the intent and purpose behind Cable Dawg University is to post trivia questions Monday through Friday, and to post some photos of good installations and bad installations. And it's a forum for military people to go on and learn more about our industry. One of the great things about that, Chuck, is a lot of people feel really comfortable in reaching out when they have a technical question. One of the things that really touches my heart is when someone's deployed and it's Saturday. They have no one else that they can reach out to. I mean, there's engineers and stuff in the Air Force, and there's very smart people, but they don't work on Saturday. And they know if they reach out to me on Cable Dawg University and they got a technical question, they'll probably get an answer that day. And so it's a great platform. It's a great tool to network. It's a great tool to learn. I know that the Lightning Force Academy up in Pennsylvania, which that's the location where Air National Guard people go to learn how to become cable dogs. So it's basically the Guard version of Shepherd Air Force Base. And so they do a great job of teaching people up there. And they a lot of times they'll pull up my trivia question of the day and ask their students, hey, what is the TIA standard for cabling, or whatever the question might be that day. So
that's very cool. And there are some interesting people in there. Chris Hobbs is in there. He's the managing director for Bixie. I'm in these. You'll see me post every once in a while. I deliberately don't answer your trivia questions because I want to give other people the opportunity. Yeah. Otherwise, I could jump on and answer them, but just, it's kind of,
that's right.
I'll let other people kind of go through those exercises. So the last question.
Yeah. It's great to have you in there, Chuck.
I appreciate you letting me be in it, because like I said, I was never in the military. So when you invited me, I was like, oh, I'm not really a military cable dog, but hey, I'll jump in. I'm not afraid of opportunity, that's for sure. So one of the things that I do is I try to encourage and get people motivated in our industry and learn in our industry stuff. And I mentor quite a few people, and I get I get questions from people all the time. And one of the most common questions I get from cable dogs, and you and I know one together mutually, I'm not going to say who it is. When they're coming out of the service, they're I don't want to say afraid, because it's not the right word. They're timid. They're not sure, because they're used to doing this military thing, but now they're going to be doing this civilian thing. And I'm telling them, like, wait, you're a cable dog? You got security clearance? Dude, you got the golden ticket. What are you talking about? Well, you have nothing to be afraid. When you come out, people will be chasing you down with opportunities. So what piece of advice could you give to somebody who's, they're doing their last 6 months, whatever, and they're looking towards retiring and they want to continue doing cabling and stuff? What piece of advice could you give them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I talked a little bit about it before, is networking. That's a huge piece. Being part of BICSI and AFCEA events are great. Getting as many certifications as that you can get. There's different government programs that'll help pay for those certifications. And so to not jump on that free training dollars when you're in and it's paid for, I tell you what, when you get on the outside, you and I are pretty blessed in the company that we work for. They pay for a lot of training for us, but a lot of companies don't. And I know there's a number of RCDDs that, they pay for their own conferences. They have to pay for their own continuing education credits and stuff like that. And so I would say jump all over that. And what I would say is do that early in your career. If you got an opportunity to get out and meet people, I would highly recommend that. Meet people in the industry, whether it's at a conference, whether it's at a Cisco Live conference or a BICSI conference or a Data Center Dynamics conference. Another tool that the military really promotes is volunteering. And so one of the things that I would recommend is that you volunteer to help raise money for the AFCEA scholarship. And so a lot of the really active chapters will have a golf tournament. So I'd recommend to jump in and organize that. That's a great way to meet a bunch of people, a bunch of sponsors. If you pull off a really good event, you might wow your next employer. They might say, wow, this guy can really put on a good golf tournament. And I know he's, part of a IT telecommunication field. So what a great opportunity to highlight and showcase your capabilities of managing something and being a self-starter. So I would recommend that. There is an Air Force program called EWI. So it's EWI. And it stands for Education with Industry. And so in the past, it was only really available to officers. They have since opened it up to GS employees, so civilians like GS-11 to GS-13s, and now they're doing a pilot program for that. And that pilot program is going to be available for staff sergeants through chief master sergeant. So a lot of Cable Dogs on the Cable Dawg University page fall within those ranks. And what they're recommending is that you reach out to your functional manager for your career field to see if you could be part of that EWI program. And so let me explain a little bit why that would be a benefit. So the EWI program means that you're going to go out and work with a company like General Dynamics. So you're going to be an active duty person, and you're going to go work for a company like General Dynamics or Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin or another large Department of Defense contractor. And it's a 10-month program. And basically what they're doing is they're showing you different functions of the job. Maybe it's an engineer, maybe it's a project manager, maybe it's a capture person working on a large proposal. And so when I worked at General Dynamics, so GTE Government Systems was sold to General Dynamics, and at General Dynamics, we had an active EWI program. And what I would tell you is the guys that participated in that, most of those guys went on to make colonel or general, which is, a very commendable rank within the officer corps. And I would also say that the guys who decided to get out of the military, maybe they only wanted to spend 6 or 8 years in the military, and they got out. A lot of them went to work for these large Department of Defense contractors, and they started out at a really high salary. And so my recommendation to a Cable Dawg is to get with your functional manager and ask them, hey, can I be part of this EWI program? Because it is a great, great opportunity. If you get on with the right company, you'll learn the business side of our business, which could be super valuable if you wanted to open up your own business, or if maybe you just wanted to go work for a company. I think it would definitely give you a leg up. And so I would highly recommend that.
I could definitely see the value in that. When we did Penren,
Yeah.
we worked with all those companies you name, I've worked with.
Yeah.
And just the opportunity to be able to work with them, and that role, that's a huge benefit right there. And because that's a feather in your cap that you put up that on your resume, so they really, Cable coming out of the middle doesn't really have anything to worry about. I mean, other than, how's civilian life different from military life? There's that kind of transition change. But for as far as skill sets and knowledge and, I would take, if I was a hiring manager and I had to fill one slot and everything else being equal, but one person was a Cable Dawg, the other person just came with I would probably take the Cable Dawg because I know that they can think outside the box. I know they can find those cracks in a building, where, you put a commercial building installer, as soon as you put them in any kind of a building that doesn't have drop tile ceilings, oh no, I can't do cabling there, So I would easily take a Cable Dawg over someone who had equivalent experience just only in the civilian side, just because of the breadth.
Definitely would bring a lot of versatility to your team. And, I've worked with some just absolutely terrific Cable Dawgs, some, anywhere from an airman first class all the way up to chief master sergeant. And they make great employees. And any employer out there that sees someone, running a resume into their business with Cable Dawg on it. It may not say Cable Dawg. It might say Cable
Right.
Systems Journeyman, or something along that lines. You can bet that you're going to get somebody that has had to work in a lot of different environments and sometimes really stressful environments. And so someone that can succeed there probably can succeed in wiring up a Target store. So.
Really cool. Well, Dan, I appreciate your time, and I hope to get to see you in the Big C Winter Conference and get to taste some of your barbecue. I keep hearing about this world's famous Dan Munson barbecue, and I live in Florida, but it seems like every time that you're here, I'm on the road somewhere else.
Chuck, I hope to see you in person in Orlando. I think that's where the conference is going to be, and I'll have a couple smokers fired up, and we'll have some brisket together.
Hey, maybe I'll bring you some fresh pig to put on them smokers.
Hey, that sounds good.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Dan. I appreciate you.
And very good.
Thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.